I'd been folding the same t-shirt for a good minute before realizing it was already folded. That's the kind of night it was, slow, dragging, the kind where the silence in the house feels heavier than anything you can touch. The rain had been steady since late afternoon, soft against the windows, like background noise you stop noticing until you're suddenly aware of it again. The clock above the kitchen doorway ticked louder than usual. I sat at the counter, phone in hand, thumb hovering over a half-typed message I wasn't going to send. It was to her. My stepmom. Claire. We didn't text much. Not really. Just practical things, groceries, bills, whatever Dad forgot to mention. But lately, I'd caught myself wanting to type more, like asking how her day was, or what she was reading lately. Things I didn't have any right to ask. I erased the message and set the phone face down. I first noticed her small habits months ago, the way she always tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the way she remembered my coffee order better than I did, how she'd pause mid-sentence if she thought I wasn't listening. It wasn't anything she did on purpose. That made it worse somehow. The front door creaked open, and instinct made me glance up. But of course, no one was there. Dad was out of town, some conference 2 states away. I was supposed to have the house to myself for the week. I poured myself another cup of coffee I didn't need and leaned against the counter, letting the warmth seep into my hands. Outside, headlights passed once, then nothing again. That's when I heard it, 3 quiet knocks. I hesitated, my hand still on the mug. It was late, almost 11. When I opened the door, she was standing there. Claire. My stepmom. She wasn't dressed like she usually was around the house, no loose hoodie, no messy bun. She wore a soft gray cardigan over a simple white top, damp from the rain at the shoulders. Her hair stuck slightly to her cheek, and she brushed it back without looking at me yet. Sorry, she said finally, voice low, almost swallowed by the rain. I couldn't sleep. I stepped aside without thinking. You okay? She gave a small nod and walked past me into the kitchen, the faint scent of her shampoo trailing behind her. Something citrusy. Neither of us spoke for a moment. I fiddled with the edge of a napkin until it tore. She set her thermos on the counter and wrapped her hands around it, even though she hadn't opened it yet. You're up late, she said eventually, not looking at me. Couldn't sleep either, I answered, and it sounded truer than I meant it to. The silence after that wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. She leaned against the counter, tapping her fingers lightly, like she was waiting for something, maybe for me to say more. I wanted to. I wanted to ask why she was here, why she'd knocked instead of calling, why her voice had sounded like that. But instead, I took a sip of my coffee and let the moment stretch between us. Then, just as she picked up her thermos and turned toward the hallway, she stopped. Looked back at me. I'll be in the guest room, she said softly, almost like she wasn't sure she should. I nodded. Good night. She hesitated, only half a second, but long enough to notice, before disappearing down the hallway. I stood there in the kitchen long after she'd gone, tracing the rim of my mug with my finger. My phone buzzed on the counter. One new message. From her. If you're awake, can we talk? And just like that, the quiet night wasn't quiet anymore. I didn't reply to her message right away. I read it 3 times instead, thumb hovering over the keyboard, before locking the phone and leaving it on the counter. I don't know why. Maybe I thought ignoring it would make it feel less real. But I didn't sleep. Not a minute. By morning, the rain had stopped, replaced by a heavy gray stillness outside. I found her in the kitchen, standing barefoot by the stove, holding a mug with both hands like it was keeping her steady. Her cardigan from last night hung over one shoulder, hair still damp at the ends. Morning, I said quietly. She glanced up. Hey. Her voice was softer than usual, like she'd been up late too. I poured myself coffee, trying not to look at her, but failing anyway. She noticed, of course she noticed, and set her mug down. "I kept you up," she said. "Didn't mean to." "You didn't," I lied, taking a sip I didn't need. "I just don't sleep much lately." Her gaze lingered, searching, like she wanted to ask why but decided against it. Instead, she stirred her tea, spoon tapping lightly against the ceramic. She broke the silence first. "Your dad called this morning. He'll be staying an extra night." "Oh." I cleared my throat, forcing casualness I didn't feel. "That's fine." "Is it?" she asked, looking at me now. I met her eyes for the briefest second before glancing away. "Yeah. Gives me time to finish my project." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. There was something in the air I couldn't name. It wasn't obvious, not loud, but it was there, in the way she held her mug tighter, in the way my shoulders felt tense without moving. Later, I found her in the living room, kneeling on the floor with an open box of old photographs scattered around her. "You organizing?" I asked, leaning on the doorframe. "Trying to," she said, without looking up. "Your dad's been after me to throw some of these out, but her voice trailed off. She picked up one picture and stared at it a little too long. "Is that you?" I asked. She turned the photo toward me. It was her, years younger, sitting on the hood of a car, laughing into the sun. "College," she said quietly. "Feels like someone else's life." I sat beside her on the carpet, close enough to see the faint smudge of ink on her thumb, far enough to pretend it didn't mean anything. "You look happy," I said. She gave a small, self-conscious laugh, shaking her head. "I was lighter back then. Before I got serious." Something in her tone made me glance at her, but she was still looking at the photo. We didn't say anything for a while. Just sat there, the carpet pressing lines into our palms, surrounded by fragments of her past. When she finally set the photo down, our hands brushed. Barely. A simple, accidental thing. But I felt it like static, sharp, immediate. She didn't move hers right away. And I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I avoided the guest room all morning. Not on purpose. At least, that's what I told myself. I stayed in my room, headphones on, pretending to work on my laptop while the cursor blinked at a blank screen. At some point, I heard her moving around, soft footsteps, a door closing, the creak of the hallway floorboard I'd stepped over 1,000 times. I thought about saying something. Asking if she wanted coffee. Asking anything. But I didn't. By late afternoon, the rain was back, heavier this time, and I found her in the kitchen again, wiping down the counter even though it was already clean. "You missed lunch," she said without looking at me. "Wasn't hungry." She nodded, slow, like she wanted to say something else but didn't. I hesitated before stepping closer, leaning against the other side of the counter. "You okay?" I asked finally. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away just as quickly. "Fine. Just restless, I guess." She poured herself more tea and set the kettle down too carefully, like she was keeping her hands busy on purpose. The air between us felt heavier than yesterday. She started telling me about some old friend who'd texted her, but her voice drifted halfway through, and neither of us picked up the silence. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. I caught myself watching her hands, the way she curled them around the mug, fingertips pale from the heat. She noticed and set the mug down abruptly. "Your dad called again," she said, voice steady but low. "He'll be back tomorrow night." I nodded, swallowing words I didn't even know I wanted to say. That evening, the power flickered once, then settled. The house felt smaller somehow, the rain pressing closer against the windows. She was sitting on the couch when I passed through the living room, her legs tucked under her, hair falling forward as she scrolled through something on her phone. "Hey," she said, without looking up. I stopped. "Hey." There was space beside her. Too much space, maybe. I sat down anyway. The movie she had on was halfway through. Some old romantic drama. We watched in silence, neither of us really paying attention. Halfway through, she shifted slightly, her knee brushing mine. She didn't move it away. I glanced at her. She was still watching the screen, but her hand rested near the cushion between us, close enough to reach. I almost did. Almost. But then my phone buzzed on the table, loud, sudden. She flinched. Pulled her hand back. I grabbed the phone like it would help steady me, but I didn't check it. Couldn't. After a long pause, she stood. "I should call it a night," she said softly. I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. She hesitated at the hallway, one hand on the frame. Looked back at me like she wanted to say something, then didn't. I stayed on the couch long after, staring at the untouched space where her hand had been. And I couldn't stop thinking, if the phone hadn't buzzed, I don't know what would have happened. By late evening, the rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and damp, streets shining under the pale street lights. I found her on the back porch, leaning against the railing, arms folded loosely, staring at nothing. I hesitated at the doorway, one hand on the frame. "Can't sleep?" I asked. She shook her head slowly, without turning around. "Not tonight." I stepped outside. The wood was cool under my feet, still damp from the earlier storm. "You should get some rest," I said. "Can't," she murmured, brushing a strand of wet hair behind her ear. Too much noise in my head. Something about the way she said it, quiet but sharp, made me stay beside her. We stood there, side by side, listening to the distant hum of cars on the wet road. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she asked softly, "Are you seeing someone?" The question caught me off guard. "No," she nodded, still staring straight ahead. Her thumb worried the edge of her cardigan sleeve, twisting it over and over. "Why?" I asked. "No reason," she said, too quickly. I let it go, but something shifted then. The air felt heavier, like we'd stumbled into territory neither of us had mapped out yet. After a pause, I said, "I saw you with the photos yesterday." She exhaled through a faint smile. "Yeah. Got lost in them for a while." "You looked happy," I said quietly. Her hand froze on her sleeve. "That was a long time ago." "But it's still you," I said, almost before I realized it. That made her finally look at me. And the weight of her gaze, it landed somewhere deep, someplace I wasn't ready for. "I used to think," she said, voice steady but low, "that once you reach a certain age, you stop wanting things you shouldn't want." She stopped there, like she'd already said too much. I turned toward her, searching her expression, but she kept her eyes on the wet railing, fingers tracing the grain of the wood. "What kind of things?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Just stood there, breathing slowly, like she was deciding whether or not to open another door. Then she said softly, "Things that complicate everything." Something inside me pulled tight at those words. I wanted to ask if she meant me. I wanted to tell her I thought about her more than I should. But I didn't. Because just then, the porch light from next door clicked on, spilling across the yard. A reminder that the world existed beyond this small space. She stepped back slightly, as if waking from something. "We should go inside," she said, though neither of us moved. I stared at her hand on the railing, close enough to touch. My fingers twitched, but I stopped myself. She turned then, slowly, meeting my eyes, holding them for a moment too long. And before she walked inside, she asked quietly, almost to herself, "What are we doing?" The next morning, she was gone. Not gone, just different. Her mug wasn't on the counter. No cardigan draped on the chair. The living room was tidy, too tidy, like she'd erased herself from it overnight. I waited until almost noon before knocking softly on the guest room door. No answer. By evening, I heard her car pull out of the driveway without a word. For 2 days, the house felt emptied of something I couldn't name. I tried not to notice. I woke up late, made coffee I didn't drink, opened tabs on my laptop I didn't read. Every time I reached for my phone, I stopped myself. No texts. No knock on my door. Not even casual small talk in passing. She was avoiding me. On the third night, I finally caught her in the hallway, returning from somewhere, hair damp, carrying grocery bags. "Hey," I said, leaning casually against the doorframe, trying too hard to sound normal. She hesitated mid-step, like she was deciding between stopping or pretending she didn't hear me. Finally, she set the bags down and offered a faint smile. "Hey. You've been out a lot," I said carefully. "Just errands," she answered, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, swallowing the 100 questions I wanted to ask. We ended up in the kitchen together, side by side, unpacking groceries in silence. At one point, I reached for a carton of milk, and our hands brushed, the same small, accidental thing that used to make the air shift between us. But this time, she moved hers away quickly. "Sorry," she said, too quietly. I frowned. "You don't have to, it's fine," she interrupted. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white around the bag handle. Later that night, I overheard her on the phone, her voice muffled but urgent. I know. It's not what you think. He's here, yes, but, no, of course not." I froze at the doorway, my chest tight. I didn't hear the rest. The next day, I left the house. Drove aimlessly. Sat in a cafe I didn't like just to avoid being around her. When I came back, her car was in the driveway, but the lights inside were off. I stood outside my door for a long time, phone in hand, typing and deleting messages I couldn't send. Did I do something wrong? Do you want me to leave? Do you want me? I erased them all. That night, I sat on the couch in the dark, the sound of the rain starting again outside. Somewhere down the hall, her door closed softly. And for the first time, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was past midnight when I found her in the kitchen. The only light came from the open fridge, painting her in pale blue as she stood barefoot, holding a glass of water she hadn't sipped yet. For a moment, I thought about turning back, retreating to my room, staying quiet like I had all week. But I didn't. "You're still up," I said softly. She turned, startled, then relaxed when she saw me. "Couldn't sleep." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed loosely, trying to look casual even though my chest felt tight. "Me neither," I said. The silence stretched between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, she set the glass down on the counter and spoke, voice lower than usual. "I heard you come back late today." "Yeah," I nodded. "Needed some air." Her fingers tapped the rim of the glass once, twice, before she looked up. "You've been avoiding me," she said, not accusing, just stating. I hesitated. "I thought you were avoiding me." Her lips parted like she wanted to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she shook her head slightly and smiled, small, tired, almost apologetic. "Listen," I said, taking a step closer, lowering my voice, "if I've crossed a line, just tell me. I'll stop." "Oh, you didn't," she interrupted softly. I blinked. "I didn't?" She shook her head again, exhaling like she'd been holding it in all week. "That's the problem." I frowned. "I don't understand." You didn't cross a line, she repeated, but I think about what happens if we do. The words hung in the air, louder than anything else in the room. I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. I looked at her, really looked this time. The faint crease between her brows, the way her hands stayed perfectly still now, like she was scared to move. And for the first time I saw it, she was just as afraid as I was. I've been trying not to feel this, she whispered finally, but pretending's exhausting. I stepped closer without meaning to. My hand rested on the counter, inches from hers. You don't have to pretend, I said quietly. Her eyes met mine then, steady, unblinking. A beat passed. 2. And then she placed her hand over mine, light, barely there, but deliberate. We didn't kiss. We didn't speak. We just stood there, side by side, breathing the same heavy air, neither pulling away. After a while, she said, almost to herself, okay. And somehow, that one word felt louder than anything else. It's strange how routines shift without you noticing. 3 weeks later, the house feels different, lighter somehow, though nothing has really changed. The rain still comes and goes. The clock in the kitchen still ticks a little too loudly. The coffee still tastes bitter if you forget the sugar. But something between us is softer now. Dad came back from his trip, and everything slipped back into place, or at least it looked like it from the outside. Same conversations about groceries. Same Sunday dinners. Same quiet laughter over bad TV. But when I catch her eyes across the table, it's different. Not louder. Just understood. One evening, she found me out back, sitting on the bench by the fence, the same spot where she once stood under the porch light, asking, "What are we doing?" She brought 2 mugs, hers with tea, mine with black coffee, both steaming in the cool air. Without saying anything, she sat next to me, setting my mug down on the wooden slat between us. I glanced at her, and she gave me the smallest smile. "How was your day?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "Yours?" She nodded, tucking her hair behind her ear the same way she always does when she's thinking. Quiet. It wasn't the words that mattered anymore. It was the spaces between them. We didn't need to talk about what had happened in the kitchen weeks ago, the hand on mine, the unspoken okay. Instead, we learned to carry it silently. In shared glances. In the way she remembers I take my coffee without sugar. In the way I brew her tea before she asks. Sometimes, it still feels fragile, like one wrong move could undo everything. But then she'll walk past me in the hallway and let her fingers brush mine, just briefly, just enough to remind me that we're here. That we're choosing this, quietly, every day. Last night, as the rain returned, I found her at the kitchen counter, half asleep over a book she wasn't really reading. I set her thermos beside her, tea, just the way she likes it, and leaned against the counter, watching her wake slowly. She smiled without opening her eyes. 8:47, she murmured. I frowned. What? Nothing, she said, shaking her head lightly. Just, that's the time. I glanced at the clock. 8:47 p.m. exactly. She didn't explain it, and I didn't ask. But somehow, it felt like something only we'd understand. And maybe that's what this is, not a grand confession, not an ending, not even a beginning. Just this. This quiet, steady thing we've built in the pauses.